Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about how to leverage your equity. What does that really mean? Is just trying to figure out the amount of value you have in your house minus what you owe, is trying to figure out what to do with that amount of equity, essentially, to be able to put yourself in a better position. But before I get right into it, I'm going to do a quick dad joke. So, how do you make a waterbed more bouncy? How do you make a waterbed more bouncy? You put spring water in it. Get it? Pew pew. All right. So getting right into it, let's first talk about equity. Let's start with depreciation. So as you own a house, your house will naturally improve in value. Okay, it's going to get higher in value. So for example, if you buy a house for $400,000 and every year you're expected to get 5% on the previous value on the house, that next year your house is going to be worth about, for maybe like what's 5% for 420-ish, right? So, and then next year it's 5% on 420 and then 5% on the previous year. So that's how appreciation works. Now, as your house grows in value, you're gonna have what's called equity, because you're gonna be paying down your mortgage, because equity is basically what your market value of your house of its current market value of the house minus what you own the house, and there's a portion of equity. So let's say after about 5 years you have about $100,000 worth of equity, for example. So your house is now worth 500 and you owe about, let's say you owe 375, so you're about 125, because after 5 years of mortgage pay down, maybe it's like $25,000 less. So we have $125,000 worth of equity. Okay. Now the question is, what can you do with that equity? There's a couple ways you can go about it. So first, one thing you can do is obviously sell the house. You sell the house, you take the value of the house, and then whatever you sell it for, then you subtract out from that market value. Say from 500, you subtract out maybe 6, 7, maybe 8% of that to pay for all the real estate fees to sell your house. So let's say it's 10%. So if you sell a house for 500, you probably have to pay around maybe 40, maybe 35 to $50,000, depending on the situation, to sell your house, depending on the market, depending on what's going on, depends on a lot of things. So let's say, keep it easy, 10% of it goes toward the real estate fees. Now you're down to 450, right? And then 450, subtract out what you owe on the house, 375, you have about $75,000. And then that $75,000 is the profit that you make from selling your house. And that's how you can cash out on your equity. And that 75K goes into your bank account, do whatever you want with it. Now, that's one way to leveraging your equity. The next option is something called basically what's called taking out a cash out refinance, or financing that equity, right? So one way you can look at this is that when you do a cash out refinance, same idea, but you can generally take out about, depending on the loan program, you can go up to like 90% of the value of your house for the new loan. For example, same situation, $500,000. You can only go up to 90% of 500, which is about 450. So your new loan can be as much as 450, right? So that $450,000 loan replaces the current loan that you have. And all the fees come out of 450. Let's say all the real estate fees, which is generally a lot less than the real estate fees, but let's say it's about 2%. Let's say your 2% cost, so it's like $9,000, it's like $9,000 or $10,000. So let's say it's from 450, you take out like $10,000, and your 440, right? Subtract out 375, you walk away with about roughly $75,000, right? So with that amount, you can keep your house. You're not selling it. You just have a bigger loan. And the idea is you're taking that $75,000 and doing something with it. Whether if you're doing debt payoff, you can consolidate a bunch of debt. You can use it for home repairs, big purchases, buy a car, all sorts of stuff, right? And the financing of the equity is very similar to doing like what's called a home equity line of credit, or HELOC, or taking on an equity loan. Both basically, all the cash out refinance, the home equity line of credit, and the equity loan are all basically the same idea. Now, here's the decision you have to make in regards to that is, does it make sense to take out a bigger loan? Ideally, the best situation, the ideal situation is that when you're doing a cash out refinance, is that your rate potentially is about the same, if not better. And whatever you're doing that is putting yourself forward. For example, I have a lot of clients to do a cash out refinance to pay off an extraordinary amount of debt. And the idea of paying that $75,000 is paying off that much debt is that the idea is that the new mortgage payment is gonna be putting yourself where all your debts are paid for and your overall finances is going to improve. So for example, even if your mortgage payment goes up with the, because even if the rates, for example, the same, your mortgage payment is still going to go up. However, you hope that the change in how high the mortgage payment goes is going to be lower than how much debt you're paying off. So if you're paying, I've had clients basically do this where they save $2,000 a month with their mortgage being about $1,000 higher. That's for example. I even had clients that saved $2,000 a month where their rate actually tripled higher and still saved $2,000 a month because that's how it works. And then the home equity line of credit, if we're going in the other option, where it's called a second lien or a second mortgage, basically what you're doing is you're doing a different loan that's secured by the equity of your home and turning that into its own mortgage. You're not messing with the current mortgage that you have when you're doing this way. So this falls in the line of the home equity line of credit or home equity loan. These keep your current mortgage the same, but the separate mortgage is for the equity. So for example, same scenario. Let's say your house is worth $450, you owe $375, and let's say the bank can only give you, let's say $75,000 in either the line of credit, the home equity line of credit, or the home equity loan. Now the question is, which one do you use? To me, so how the home equity loan works is like you would take out a $75,000 loan, and that's it. You have two mortgages on that, and you make the payment, and you get the $75,000 lump sum. Home equity line of credit, what it does, it turns that $75,000 into a line of credit. So that's your credit limit. Basically, the best way to think about a home equity line of credit, it's basically a secured credit card. So imagine your credit card being secured by the equity of your home, and that limit is $75,000. And you treat it like a credit card. Your payments based on what you owe, right? Not what you take out as far as the limit goes. So if you take out a $75,000 home equity line of credit, but you only take out, your balance is only 20 grand, your payment's based on 20 grand, right? So and it's generally a lot better than a credit card, because with credit cards, normal unsecured credit cards, they actually range from like 6 to like 26% or something like that. For home equity line of credits, they are variable typically, but they really have a much smaller band of what they can operate in. That depends on the bank, so you got to ask about that. But for mine, the HELOC that I have only ranges from like 7 to 9%. But what's nice is that the payments are relatively low. For example, I have a $100,000 HELOC on my condo. If I took the full balance of $100,000, the payment's about $800. So if you think about it, it's not that bad. I actually advise a lot of clients, if they take out a HELOC, the best way I can compare it is that if you take out a $30,000 car loan, auto loan, your payment's probably going to be around $400, $500. Whereas the payment, if you used your HELOC to pay for the car for $30,000, your payment on that HELOC is only like $300 or less, something like that. So generally, I always tell people that the HELOC terms are significantly better. Now with HELOCs, I'm big pro HELOC, but you do have to be responsible for it. It is a financial tool. You do have to be. It is very exciting to have basically a credit card that has such a big limit that you're not used to. You still have to be responsible. You can't put yourself in a bunch of unnecessary debt, consumer debts, things like that. I wouldn't do it for those things, but you can use it to consolidate debt. You can use it for home and renovations, improvements, or even down payments for other homes. Just keep in mind that you have to pay it down, and as you pay it down, you have more of a balance to use. So keep that in mind with home equity lines of credit. So I'm very much pro home equity lines of credit, depending on how much you're willing to take out. With a home equity loan, it's just a lump sum. So once you take it out, you use it, that's it, right? To me, it's a one-time thing, and then you have this payment. Now, you don't always have to pay it off. you can always just like make the minimum payment for both the home equity line of credit and the home equity loan. You could just make the minimum payments. You don't have to pay it off sooner than you need to. And then when you sell your house, it's the first mortgage that gets paid off and then the second loan. So hopefully you're making enough to pay off all those things, and then you basically move forward without any debts. Now, overall, the question is that I always walk through with a lot of clients is trying to figure out when to use a HELOC, when to use a home equity line of credit, or sorry, use a cash out refinance. My threshold is about, because most clients in this current market are going up on the rate typically, or keeping the same rate when they do a cash out refinance. My threshold where it starts to make more sense is where you're spending, if you need like more than $80,000 to $90,000, and you're doing it for debt consolidation. Specifically for debt consolidation, because at that point, if you have $80,000 to $90,000, even at a higher rate, even 1% higher, you most likely will save on a monthly basis if you consolidate all that debt into your mortgage. So that's kind of where the threshold is. But anything other than $80,000 or more and debt consolidation, anything else, I really would just recommend a home equity line of credit, because if you're just using it for home improvements, I highly recommend home equity line of credit. Your terms are going to be a little bit better. Your situation, because depending on how much you spend and when you spend it, the home equity line of credit gives you a lot more flexibility, because it is basically a credit card. So as you pay it down, you have more to use. You only pay on what you need to use, so on and so forth. So that's why, and also it keeps your rate the same. That way, if let's say you are one of those people that bought in 2022 and 21, where your rate's below 3.5%, that's the best way to keep your rate the same. Now, what I will say is that if you can get a home equity line of credit and you've owned your house for more than 4 years, what I really recommend is just take out a home equity line of credit, and you can use it basically as an emergency savings line. I've had one for almost 10 years and kind of used it the same way. And then if you move forward, you can use it for home repairs, especially if you're renting out a place. You can potentially use it for future things. So it just gives you another tool to use. So if you plan on renting out the current house after, a year from now or 6 months from now, I highly recommend, just if you have a decent amount of equity, more than, I would say 20, maybe 30% equity, I highly recommend getting a HELOC, just because it gives you a nice emergency savings line where you're not using your high interest credit cards, you're using your secured home equity line of credit. And that's going to be a lot easier terms. The thing about those home equity lines of credit is that it's not like the unsecured credit cards where you charge twice for interest. You actually just pay your normal payment. It does impact the principal balance a little bit depending on the terms. So there's some HELOCs that do a interest only payment, which is what I have, and then you can choose to add principal if you want to, or they have their payment structured with principal in it. So you just got to ask as far as that goes. But those are the couple ways you can leverage your equity in regards to be able to put yourself in a better position. But it really depends on your finances and what you intend to do on it. The last thing you could do is something called a private second. That gets a little fancy, where you're having someone, you're lending from a person basically, and they're basically giving you money that's secured by the equity of your home. And you can be a little more flexible with that because you're dealing with a person instead of a lending institution. That it goes into a different crazy topic, but basically you can do whatever you want with those terms because it's with another person. You just gotta get creative, see if it makes sense for you. But those are for more like investor individuals, because that requires a lot of special terms. So special terms, not in regards to words, but terms of the loan and specific goals. So hopefully that had give you guys some insight on what you can do with your equity of your home, because there's a lot of ways to leverage it, but those are like probably the top three main ways. Either selling the house, second is to cash out refinance, and third, taking out a second lien, which is the home equity line of credit or the equity loan. So hopefully I gave you some ideas on what you can do with your equity, so that you can move forward and hopefully build that generational wealth. Anyway, that's all I got. Nuke out.